live. This should go pretty smoothly here. Let me make sure all my other stuff is quiet and not making crazy noises. It's loading up here. Oh, I think we are ready to roll. Wonderful. We got some folks in the live chat already. Hoosier fans trying to get as much IU basketball info as they can get here with the season at a close. The Hoosiers put on a valiant fight at the end of the year, but in their fifth game in 8 days, Indiana just didn't have it. They hung in there for about 14 minutes against St. Mary's, and then the wheels fell off as the Hoosiers on Thursday night in the round of 64 lost to St. Mary's 82-53. We're not going to spend too much time on the game. You all watched it. It's in the rear view mirror. Tonight, Matt and I are going to dive into what we liked this past season, what we disliked. It was the first year for Mike Woodson as the head basketball coach at Indiana University. Plenty to look back on. We're going to break a little transfer news here on this podcast, and we're going to ask a question at the end that I think a lot of Hoosier fans have had in mind for a few years. So stay tuned. We've got all of that and so much more here on episode 247 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022, our first episode in springtime. I am your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, you watched the game. Indiana just got destroyed really in the second half by a good St. Mary's team. What caught you off guard when it's all said and done about that round of 64 game? Because both of us did have IU winning. What did we miss in that St. Mary's matchup?
We missed how tired their legs would be after 5 games in 9 days and
8 days.
At 5 games in 8 days and such a terrible turnaround from the first 4 to waiting 4 hours on a plane after playing to not getting in and not getting enough. It was not in the cards. You know what? And honestly, I was watching that performance and I was like, this is embarrassing. And then Kentucky lost to St. Peter's and I didn't care anymore. So it happens. It's the NCAA tournament. We ran into a buzzsaw while we were locked in a coffin. And that coffin was, this is some torture or some horror movie reference, but we were put in this coffin because of the Big Ten tournament and having to make a run. We had to win all those games to even make the tournament. Then we had to win the first 4 games to even make it to where we got. You know what? We won a game of the tournament. The first 4 game is a tournament game.
Absolutely.
That's more than we asked for. We asked to get into the tournament. Then we, without a doubt, made it into the tournament, ran into a very good St. Mary's team that we probably should have beaten. You know what? It happens. And I am not mad at all. It was a good season. Everybody on the roster can say that they've made the NCAA tournament now. The program can say, at the minimum, this is the goal. Yeah. The minimum is 10-10 or maybe slightly below 500 in the conference. And a tournament berth. That should be the bare minimum. But that was what was needed to have been achieved this year. This is not a title winning team. We knew that going into the year, even though they showed glimpses of possibly being better than we thought they were. They weren't able to fully put it together throughout the season due to injuries, lack of form, people getting suspended. But what we did was we created a foundation for what next year's team, the 2023 team, the 2024 team can be built upon. And that is all that we asked for. And that's the program going in their correct direction.
going in the right direction. And I think that's all that matters. You said you weren't mad about the game. I'm not mad, especially after sleeping on it. Who didn't win a tournament game this year, Matt? Kentucky didn't win a tournament game. Iowa didn't win a tournament game. How about a team like Rutgers? They lost in the first four after all I heard at the end of the regular season was how great Rutgers was because of their quad one wins. So very encouraging ending to the season. The people I am mad at are the people that decided that they weren't comfortable with Indiana losing a game after a few straight wins and pointing fingers and saying that IU quit and IU packed
Are
it
you
in.
talking
IU
about Dan
down.
Dockich?
I'm talking. It wasn't just him, but
No, it was not him.
frankly, the fact that so many people decided to point their finger and put down this Indiana team after all they had accomplished at the end of the season, you really hurt your credibility as far as your opinion is concerned when you say that Indiana quit or Indiana laid down or Indiana didn't try against St. Mary's. It's just silly. It's just flat out ridiculous.
They hurt the credibility, but I don't think they matter. That's the thing. Their opinion in the minds of the players, even in the minds of recruits, possibly, they don't give they don't give a crap.
Okay.
They don't give a crap.
Yeah.
All right. They don't, and they shouldn't, and the players shouldn't, the program shouldn't, we shouldn't even talk about them, because we as a fan base, especially if you listen to any podcast, understood what the goals of the season were going into the season. It's okay to be mad about a loss. Everybody wants to win. That's the point of competition. Nobody wants to lose. Guess what? In March Madness, everybody but one team loses.
Right.
That's how this works.
67 teams lose a game.
This is not bowl season. You don't have the teams, not even half the teams. A third of the teams in college football, or maybe a fourth of the teams in college football, end the season with a win. That's not how college basketball works. Every program, other than one, ends the season two, because one can win the NIT. So other than two teams, they end the season with a loss.
67 out of 68 NCAA tournament teams end with a loss.
Yes, and then the one NIT team will end the season with a loss. Okay, so it is what it is, but to those people, I say to you this: I understand the frustration, especially if you're frustrated in the level of performance and the level of embarrassment inflicted upon us by St. Mary's. That was not a good loss. That was a bad loss. It looked bad. They looked slow. They looked lethargic. I can see why you thought they were lazy. But there's context.
But it's not laziness, right?
And it's not laziness. There's context. And that's 5 games in 8 days. So to the people on Twitter that were mad about that loss and thought they should give more effort, I give you a challenge. I would like you to go play St. Mary's after playing 5 games in 8 days, and you tell me how your performance is. Because I guarantee you, Dan Dockich, you did not play 5 games in 8 days against a high-power offense like St. Mary's. Hell, you didn't even play when there was a 3-point line. Okay? So I do not care about people's opinions that say that. And neither should the rest of the fan base. It's fine that they have crappy opinions. That's because some of them are just slightly disappointed in their lives.
Not worth it. Yeah.
And that's fine. If you're that and you vent on Twitter, that's fine. If it makes you feel better, tweet that. That's fine. We should not pay attention to it. Now, Nithin, you have gotten me to rant for 5 minutes. None of this had to happen.
The laziness, the quitting accusations, just they have no place for this team, because they have shown you from the first game this season that's not what they're about. That's what I missed, by the way. I missed the fact that St. Mary's deliberate, methodical offense was going to drain Indiana so much. You can see why it would in hindsight, right? When an offense like theirs runs their sets for 20, 25 seconds, and then half the time ends those possessions with the basket. That's just debilitating. And now, I have heard some folks say, well, Notre Dame played in the first four, won there, and then went to San Diego and won. You're right, but Notre Dame only played 3 games in 8 days. And by the way, Alabama lost a starter in the first 7 or 8 minutes of that game. So
also, IU and Notre Dame win in 2 completely different ways. Notre Dame wins by outshooting their opponents. Right. IU does not outshoot them. That's what St. Mary's does, and St. Mary's buried us by doing so. Those teams win in March. IU has a much tougher time winning games like that. There's a lot of context. Look, Nithin, I know I just went off on Dan Dawkins. Dan, if you're listening to this, you're right on some things. You're wrong on some things. You were terribly wrong about this, okay? And it's not a hill you want to die on, and that's all I'm saying.
And exactly. And so Indiana ends up with that loss to finish 21-14 on the season. We look at some high-level numbers, right? They finished 9-11 in Big Ten play in the regular season. You tack on 2 Big Ten tournament wins and the loss to Iowa, the Bohannon bomb from half court. You finish sort of 11-12 if you want to go that route in Big Ten play. Indiana made the first 4, won in the first 4 against a quality Wyoming team. And that's what we look at, as you pointed out, Matt, as the floor, as the foundation for this program here in the Mike Woodson era. Let's give out letter grades, Matt, over the next, 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to really talk about 3 key aspects of the game, right? Offense, defense, and coaching. Yeah. So, Matt, as you look first at this offense from the first game of the year to the last, it was clearly the weaker half of basketball compared to Indiana's elite defense. The offense finished 93rd in the KenPom ratings. That was 10th in the Big Ten, above Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Penn State. They did do some good things this year. They fixed their turnover problems. They got to the free throw line a lot, but the shooting of the basketball, especially from the perimeter and the free throw line, were rough to watch. So, Matt, as you give a letter grade to this offense, what would Professor Lukens give out to the Hoosiers? And talk to me a little bit about what you saw from this team's offense this year.
The offense was not great, but we knew going into the year the offense had the chance to not be great. Right? The pieces of the puzzle were not exactly fitting very well together. We had a transfer point guard, or Rob Finney, who's iffy, playing point guard. We thought maybe Christian Lander might play, but again, he's actually now a true freshman in college. Hard for them to get minutes in college as a freshman point guard, unless you have a fantastic coach, like an all-timer, like Tom Izzo can do that. But other than that, it's very hard. We had 2 transfer wing players. Again, one who hadn't played basketball in a year and a half, and the other one was from Northwestern, who's terrible. Then we had Race and Trace, who don't exactly fit together very well. They kind of complement each other, and then they kind of really don't. Okay. So you had a bunch of pieces that kind of didn't work, and that showed this year. That starting lineup, not great. They're great defensively. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But offensively, until Xavier Johnson could shoot threes, the team really couldn't space the floor all that well. You couldn't get shots consistently for Parker Stewart. Miller Kopp, I think, underperformed offensively. I think he could have done a lot more than he did. I think he picked his spots terribly this year. Race Thompson was great the second half of the year until he wasn't. And specifically, I'm talking about probably the last 4 games. And Trace was Trace. Trace is an All-American type player, exactly, and was able to play. But the problem with that was the team relied entirely on post steps. That's why the Wyoming game made my eyes bleed, because both teams fed the post constantly. And the problem is, in 2022, that is not winning basketball. It's not. I'm sorry. Ask Illinois. It's not winning basketball.
And Kentucky.
And Kentucky. It's not winning basketball. It will win you regular season games against teams that are worse than you. It will occasionally result in an upset. But in the games that we won this year that were big, we shot the three-pointer well. Or we had a spectacular individual performance like Rob Finney's. That's what needs to win games. The only people on this team that could offer individual performances to that level by the end of the year, like I'm talking about Rob Finney's 20-point game against Purdue, is Xavier Johnson and Trace. But the problem with both of them is that their games are reliant upon having shooters that are reliable around them to unlock them. Race is not that guy. That's why you saw somebody like a Geronimo play towards the end of the year. Parker Stewart and Miller Kopp did not come as advertised. And the problem was we couldn't find shooting anywhere else. They didn't play Anthony Leal enough. Tamar Bates looked decent in the minutes that he played, but that was only towards the back end of the year. For 3/4 of the year, he looked terrible. Trey Galloway wasn't that dude. We can talk about Galloway all the time on defense, but my Lord, that dude needs a jump shot immediately. Yeah. So the offense was great, but also terrible. And so you had, I would say you had the really high highs of certain games. We played fantastically. Yeah. We were shooting well. Trace was getting everything done in the post. And those games we kind of not ran away with it because we didn't run away with a lot of games this year, but we won big games because of not just our defense, but our offense actually playing well for once. We lost a lot of games because of our offense. Too many because of our offense. And that is something going into next year needs to improve, because at the bare minimum, what we saw from the defense, which we'll talk about in a minute, will get you into the tournament. If the defense is at that level every single year, you will make the tournament because defense travels. But we need some offense to travel with it sometimes. Okay. And the level of offense this year was not acceptable. It was not good. It did not improve other than the turnovers, by the way. That was one of the big things we'll talk about improvement. The team improved in a lot of facets throughout the year, which is not something we saw under the Archer Miller era. But there are some stuff to build off of in this offense, unlocking point guards potential throughout the year and increasing the way Xavier Johnson played. Nithin's going to talk about that in a bit. Hint. Bringing in new sets, adding new things, not being afraid to try something 7/8 the way through the year. For instance, adding the Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson pick and roll towards the end of the year literally got us into the tournament. And that was a wrinkle they added into it. I don't know why they decided to upgrade. Upgrade the offense to the 21st century and not the 20th century. I don't understand, but they did it and it worked. It worked. So props to the staff for fixing the offense as much as they could. But I think there's got to be a lot of shakeups in the roster and a lot of work individually on the offense this summer in order to get it to a level that is acceptable for Indiana basketball next year and what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a grade you want to put on the offense for their performance this past season?
C+.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ding them just a little bit more. I have it as a C. When it's all said and done, I think the point you made at the end there is probably the biggest one, and that's the individual improvement players like Tamar Bates, Jordan Geronimo, probably point out Anthony Leal, assuming those three players come back. Christian Lander gets looped in there as far as a fourth potential returning player. You definitely need to see that year-to-year improvement from especially Bates and Geronimo, if you ask me, on the offensive side of the ball. I want to tip my cap to our podcast co-founder, Noah Freeman, who had been on this stat all year, and he pointed it out pretty much every time the Hoosiers won, and it stood out. And that is IU, every single one of their Big Ten wins, scored 67 or more points. It ended when the Hoosiers knocked off the Illini in the Big Ten tournament 65-63. But at least as far as the 9 regular season wins are concerned, as well as the win over Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, every win that Indiana had, they had at least 67 in conference play. And that's a trend that's probably going to continue next year, a couple years down the road, especially as offenses become more advanced, as just the case is with basketball in 2022 and 2023 and 24. So the offense really has to figure it out. I was very frustrated to see the pick and roll play such a small part in the offense until pretty much the home game against Maryland, that road game against Minnesota. We just didn't see enough of it. Obviously, there was something there. Trayce Jackson-Davis, when he attacks downhill, when he catches the lob, is such a dynamic player. Yet, even in the NCAA tournament against Wyoming and St. Mary's, we didn't see too much of that, except on a couple of plays late in that Wyoming game, which frankly iced Indiana's NCAA tournament win. So overall, just way too many bogged down possessions, way too much stagnancy, even though things improved pretty much after the Wisconsin home game, still not enough as far as what we need to see from this team. Of course, I mentioned that they improved at turnovers. Of course, that was a major part of Indiana's struggles in the first 6 to 8 games of the season. Their loss at Syracuse, their loss at Wisconsin.
That's why we lost those games.
Could have been attributed to that. Again, a couple of close wins. Jackson-Davis was exceptional. Obviously, someone who goes out there and scores 18.3 per game, 8.1 rebounds per game. You will always remember his 43-point outburst against Marshall in non-conference play that set the Assembly Hall scoring record. So there were some good things. Indiana just needs more prolific shooting from beyond the arc. And I'm sick and tired that we constantly have to mention that over and over and over again. I liked the form I don't think it was too much of a mechanical problem. I think Xavier Johnson was the only player you could really point to and say, man, his shot looks really unusual. Yet Johnson kind of figured it out from deep as the year went on. So you see someone like Jordan Geronimo hit a few threes. You see someone like Parker Stewart and Miller Kopp shoot the basketball, except just for long stretches, it wasn't there. And that's what I really look to Dane Fife to try to unlock here in the offseason as Indiana's lead assistant. How can Indiana become a better shooting basketball team, both from three and from the free throw line? So I had it as a C. I'm curious to see how the incoming freshmen change this offense going into next season. Obviously, Indiana's three true freshmen coming in: Jaylen Hood, the 5-star point guard, the cream of the crop as far as you're concerned in the recruiting class. But I think two valuable pieces as well in Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn coming in. What kind of different looks, different perspective can those players give this offense? Of course, it's tough to put too much pressure on their shoulders, but it is, at the end of the day, according to 24/7 Sports, a top 15 recruiting class in college basketball. So looking forward to seeing that. Matt, defensively, it was an elite basketball team for the most part this season. Mike Woodson emphasized it from day one. And by day one, I mean literally his opening press conference, the day he took the job, basically at this point last year. Overall, Indiana's defense right now rates 23rd in KenPom. It's still the best in the Big Ten. They had an elite shot blocker in Trayce Jackson-Davis, over 3 blocks per game, a tenacious defense. They forced a lot of turnovers. What grade would you give Indiana's defense, and what additional thoughts do you have as far as IU's stellar defense this season? Do you think this type of performance is sustainable here over the next couple of years?
Defense was an A. I'll give it an A, not an A plus, an A. It's only not an A plus because there are some defensive teams that, like Virginia, right, can literally hold the team to 40 points. Didn't see that often this year. In fact, we had some games where we had some just terrible defensive lapses. But the system we use, the man-to-man pressing defensive system that we use, switching. It works. It works wonders, and it's gonna get better the more Woodson gets his players in. For instance, I was just talking about this with my parents. 2023, if you look at the 2023 recruits we have coming in, or even next year, you look at somebody like Caleb Banks, fit right in. He is going to be a defensive monster when he steps on campus. Why? Because he's a dude that's got long arms and can switch on anyone. And that kind of guy gets NBA, scouts salivating. We talk about
and IU basketball fans too.
Absolutely. Same thing. Jaylen Hood Shafino can do the same thing. Though I think he needs to work on his lateral quickness a little bit. He's going to end up looking a lot like Parker Stewart out there sometimes, but that doesn't matter because he's kind of the same size, kind of the same build. They can kind of do the same things. And so for me, I saw Mike Woodson putting his players defensively in the best positions for them to succeed.
Yeah.
That's good. That works. Okay. Yeah. And when you actually think hard and have a good defensive brain and put them in the correct places, you can build a program based on defense. Yeah. And then the offense can either come or go, but you're still going to have a baseline of how good your team is going to be.
Right.
Because if the other team can't score, it's usually pretty good for you. So, and you can build an offense off of that, right? Like, for instance, like you can maybe go for more steals, get more turnovers, get out in transition. There's ways to create offensive off of defense, getting stops, getting more possessions, getting more shots up. There's ways to create offense through defense. And so you can kind of see what Mike Woodson's trying to build here, which is very similar to what Archie tried to build, by the way, because Archie tried to do the same damn thing. He was not an offensive system, right? Tom Crean was an offensive head coach. He came in, he implemented an offensive system, and the defense was either there or the defense was really not. And when the offense didn't show up, we didn't have anything to fall back on. The defense can be there, and the defense can travel in college basketball. How well it travels is really dependent upon who's reffing the games that day, but that's neither here nor there, and we've seen that problem happen in the NCAA tournament. That is why you need some offense to show up. Last thing, by the way, on the offense, we ended the season at 33.9% from three. So basically 34% from three. A good three-point shooting program like Iowa shoots 36% from three. I would like to see IU next year take a 1% jump in three-point percentage. I don't think that's much.
Is that going from 33 to 34?
That'd be going from, it was 33.9. So I'm saying 34.
Okay.
So go from 34 to 35. Yeah. That would be remarkable improvement because 1% is very hard. Okay. But I would like to see Indiana shoot that percentage next year, especially with the players coming back. Back to defense, though. Yeah. Switching is good. Putting players in the best position to seed, aka finding that Trace Jackson-Davis, hey, he's a really good shot blocker. What if we make him a help defender and let him loose? And they did that, and it worked. Put Race Thompson on their best wing player and let him be the stopper there. When the wing player is smaller, can take people out the perimeter, get somebody like a Miller Kopp or Parker Stewart, and hope to God they can defend him. Like I said, as Woodson gets his recruits in, the defense is only going to get better. Okay. It's only going to get better because Parker Stewart and Miller Kopp, not built for this defensive system. They're not. They're not. They can't switch onto everyone. They can't guard everybody. But somebody like Caleb Banks can.
Well, and that's what's really encouraging, right? Overall, I'm going to give this defense an A-. My biggest issue with them on the defensive side of the ball is the fact that they fouled too much for my liking. And maybe that is a consequence of having slightly less than ideal pieces at certain positions. But overall, right, if Indiana could have just fouled a little bit less, it wasn't all just personnel. Some of it was decision-making. I think Indiana's defensive rating would have been even higher when the year was all said and done. Again, Indiana fouled at the second highest rate in the Big Ten. as far as conference play is concerned, just ahead of Northwestern. So even if you can get to a defense that fouls at an average level, you're really talking about a pretty significant bump. Again, there were just too many games where Xavier Johnson had to miss large chunks of the 40 minutes because he picked up a personal. We remember Trace Jackson Davis committing fouls early and often. I guess it was against Illinois, Purdue, maybe Michigan, maybe one or two other games in there. Just having that availability is extremely important and something I'm looking forward to seeing going into next year. That's why overall I gave it an A-, but I like what you said as far as the sustainability piece. I do think with Mike Woodson getting his players and you can switch everything almost 1 to 5, you will lose a key shot blocker, but I think you'll have a greater ability to press up and down the floor. You'll have a greater ability to switch when necessary. I wouldn't be surprised if next year, with a full offseason, Mike Woodson peppers in mildly a pinch of zone just to throw a curveball at the opposing defense. So getting his players
an Indiana basketball team playing zone defense?
Just a smidge to throw things off, especially if you have a long lineup out there, right? You think about Jaylen Hood, Shafino, Caleb Banks, maybe Trey Galloway, Jordan Geronimo, all on the floor together, maybe with one other player in there. I could see that lineup causing a lot of problems with their wingspan, with their athleticism. So that's something, again, we'll table for now, but overall, I do see this as sustainable going forward. And again, no one's asking Indiana to be the top defense in the country. One thing we've seen as far as a little bit of Ken Pom analysis is that basically every national champ over the last 25 years, I believe, has a top 20 offense and a top 20 defense. So if you can do that, that's a good goal to sort of think about as Indiana aims to win a national championship here.
Mind my unmindfulness. Where did Indiana end the season right now?
On defense, Indiana currently, we'll see what happens in the final few games of the NCAA tournament here, but Indiana sits 23rd right now.
Right.
So right there, Indiana's been in the top 15 for large chunks of the season, but they sit 23rd right now. So I see this as sustainable. I think Indiana can do it. Of course, just imagining it means absolutely nothing. I'm curious to see how the Hoosiers execute and pull this off here in seasons to come. But that's how Matt and I look at the offense and the defense from this past season. Lots to be excited about, a few things to be frustrated about, no question. But Indiana does seem to have a pretty short list of things to fix as far as steps they can take. And the one thing I can say about Mike Woodson is that he has shown an ability to diagnose problems and fix problems over the course of the first season he's been head coach at Indiana. With that said, now it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And as we've done the last couple of years on this podcast, this basically turns into an IU women's basketball update. And the Hoosiers are in the Sweet 16. It was a nail-biter of a game against Princeton at Assembly Hall on Monday night, where the Hoosiers came out on top 56-55. 4 players in double figures, Grace Berger with the big basket late in regulation to put the Hoosiers ahead. It was an unbelievable atmosphere at Assembly Hall. Mackenzie Holmes had a really good game. She was caught celebrating, running up the student section and high-fiving her classmates who were there to celebrate Indiana's victory and cheer on the Hoosiers. It really came through on TV. It was deafening at times at Assembly Hall. I'm sure that was a difference in the game when you consider Princeton lost by just a point and they come over from the Ivy League where you don't play in buildings like Assembly Hall during conference play. So overall, really impressed that the Hoosiers were able to dig in. Again, much like the men's tournament, the women's tournament is seeing a lot more parity. And just because Indiana's a 3 and Princeton's an 11 doesn't mean Indiana should have won by 18 points. Even UConn, who Indiana's facing on Saturday, had a tough time against UCF in their round of 32 game. And of course, UConn is a historically great program that has future top of the line WNBA draft picks. So no one expected Indiana to blow Princeton out. The Hoosiers did build a double-digit lead before Princeton came back, and now you see Indiana moving on to the Sweet 16. Yes, they play UConn. Gino Auriemma, Paige Buchers, and the UConn Huskies on Saturday afternoon in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's a 2 p.m. start on ESPN, must-see TV. Highly recommend tuning in. Frankly, for the first game as well, Saturday morning, NC State and Notre Dame. They tip off at 11:30. Winner plays IU UConn in the Elite Eight. That'll take place on Monday. Friendly reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. On Indiana HQ, we just topped 6,000 followers. So thanks to all of you for jumping on the train here. We're going to be right here with you during the offseason. I think I saw over 600 players in Division I basketball have put their name in the transfer portal since the end of the regular season. You better believe there'll be some big names who throw their name in there as far as the Big Ten is concerned, other high major programs.
Sure, there'll probably be someone or somebody from IU
that
will at least explore it.
It would be silly not to expect 2 or 3, even multiple Hoosiers put their name in the portal. That's just the name of the game nowadays in college basketball and college football. Again, it would be silly not to anticipate that. So we'll keep our eye on all the news, all the updates. Again, one-stop shop. Give us a follow at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you have, tell a friend, tell a stranger, tell a classmate, a neighbor. It doesn't really matter. Make sure they follow us as well. All right, Matt, let's talk about coaching. We graded the offense, we graded the defense, but obviously the coaching piece of this may be the one that Hoosier fans care about the most, right? That brain trust of Mike Woodson, Dane Fife, Kenya Hunter, Yasir Roseman. Talk to me about the grade you would give this coaching staff when you combine everything regarding game planning and adjustments and overcoming injuries and recruiting from the start of the year. What did you like? What grade would you give this coaching staff?
The coaching staff gets a B+. B+. Not an A-. An A- would have been around a 32. An A would have been around a Sweet 16 berth. And an A+ would have been anything after that. Okay? But the staff did what they were supposed to do this year. The team improved under them this year. That their players specifically, after we ripped them for not improved towards the end of the year, and that shows something to grow on. And none of these guys, other than Tamar Bates, were their dudes. None of them. Okay? The transfers, you can say, yeah, sure, they brought them in. And that's Miller Kopp and Xavier Johnson. Xavier Johnson was our second best player. We got a 5-star recruit in Tamar Bates, and Miller Kopp underperformed, but still was important for this team.
Yeah.
So the guys they brought in, the people
Michael
Durr as well, who by the way, helped us beat Purdue, which was one of the goals at the start of the season. They did their job. The people that brought in did the job. The staff did their job. They say all the right things. They've created a structure, obviously, at the program. It looks like what they're doing off the court is translating to stuff on the court. They even suspended people, took a stand. And heck, for some IU fans that like this, Mike Woodson got a technical this year, okay? And showed some heart and belief and some love into the program. B+. Not an A- because they could have gotten some better results somewhere along the way. We could have gotten a better tournament seed. Could have been directly into the tournament this year. Sure. Could have not had us almost crying on the podcast because we didn't get in the tournament. All things considered, B+.
Yeah, and I'm going to boost them a little bit. I'm going to give them an A-. I liked what I saw from the coaching staff this year. You know, first and foremost, right? How do they conduct themselves from a character standpoint really stands out, especially when you look at some of the news from LSU, for example, where they fired their coach due to some ridiculous circumstances and violations there. Indiana from the start, the group of Woodson, Fife, Hunter, Roseman just conducted themselves professionally. They've been someone that you can hang your hat on as far as being an IU fan is concerned. Easy to buy in, easy to believe. And that's another big reason why I give them an A-, because when you dig in another level deeper, every single player, and again, Indiana was never a Final Four contender this year. Every single player seemed committed to the program from the tip-off against Eastern Michigan to the final whistle against St. Mary's. And it didn't matter what their playing time was. It didn't matter what their role on the team was. It didn't matter how much experience they had. I understand there was the blip, the suspensions against Northwestern, and maybe a lot of you think of it as more than a blip, and I understand that. But that's Mike Woodson just holding his players accountable for mistakes. As far as on-court engagement is concerned, the players that dressed, the players that played, the players that were available from the first game to the last were fully bought into a first-year head coach and his staff. And half of them came to Indiana to play for someone else. And so when I think about the buy-in for this team, that's a big reason why I give this team an A-, for them to kick it into another gear instead of lay down or quit, and for them to kick it into another gear in those final games of the season showed me that it's not just, chit chat on Twitter that, teams are playing until the end of the season because they have a shot. It's a whole different thing to walk the walk than it is to talk the talk. And Indiana actually scratched and clawed and fought until their name was announced in the NCAA tournament. And then you saw the Wyoming deal. And then you saw what happened against St. Mary's. When I look at X's and O's, I see that Woodson addressed the turnover problems. I see that he got Trace Jackson-Davis involved in pick and roll, but there were some concerns, right? First of all, why didn't the pick and roll happen earlier? I think the Tamar Bates point you made was very significant. Frankly, that's one thing that I look at from the whole season and say, yikes. Why didn't a 5-star true freshman that Mike Woodson targeted end up playing better in the second half of the season? We'll see what kind of offseason development is there, but that's when I say, ooh, yeah, that does not sit well with me, but there's nothing I can do about it until Indiana season opener in November. So I'm not going to sit on that for 8 months. Just something that I find a little bit concerning. The recruiting has been outstanding, whether it's a transfer portal or high schoolers. Overall, I'm going to give the coaching staff an A-. And as someone who has dealt with them in press conferences, as someone who covers the basketball team for Indiana HQ, I can also tell you they're very easy to work with and they give very thought out answers. You may not agree with everything they do, but they are putting in the time and effort and the thought into every move that they make. So I like what the coaching staff has done this season. Yeah, and I'm not sure that was a problem with the previous staff with Archie Miller. I don't think it was, but
they care more than he did. But that's only because they're Hoosiers. That's what they like. Half of them are.
Yeah, that's right. Woodson and Fife do have that background, and Woodson is not someone who's willing to be caged into a certain way of thinking. Every game, he goes into it thinking about, all right, what is the one thing we can do to gain an edge against our opponent, whether it's a modern day perspective or a throwback mindset. Every game is different. It's like a fingerprint. There you go. That's why I give the coaching staff an A- overall. I like the development I saw at Xavier Johnson and Matt. That's what I like the most this season, right? When I look back and I see Xavier Johnson's development this year at the most important position on the basketball court, that's the one thing where I say I'm excited about the progress this program makes over the next few years. You can't go anywhere in basketball nowadays without a strong point guard presence. And maybe it's one player, maybe it's a combination of players, maybe it's a forward who handles the basketball most of the time, but your point on offense has to be a high-level player. And for Xavier Johnson to turn into that as the year went on after a hellish start where the turnovers and the fans booing him and he came in as a transfer, I think about that. And then I think about Jaylen Hood coming in and I say, this is really exciting. So when I see Mike Woodson develop Xavier Johnson into a high-level Big Ten point guard, and something, by the way, we said on this podcast a few episodes ago, arguably the second best point guard Indiana University has seen since Isaiah Thomas, that's really exciting to me. That fires me up if I'm an IU basketball fan. Matt, when you look back on the season, what trend, what pattern, what decision did you, what observation you had? What did you like the most as far as what Indiana showed you over the course of 2021-22?
Defense. I saw something in the way they play defense, in the system, in the ability to improve at it as the year goes on and be a national force at it. In the first year, I saw something that is incredibly promising for the program. Archie brought in defense his first year, but I believe it was like a top 40 defense. It was a remarkable improvement because the Tom Crean teams were awful at defense. So there is some context needed to that. But it was not the level of defense that we're seeing now from Mike Woodson in year one. Now that Archie's defenses did get slightly better as the years went on, to the point that they were around last year's defensive effort was very similar to this year's defensive effort. However, this year's, in my opinion, was better, not only because I think it's more replicable, but also because I thought this year's Big Ten was much harder to do it in than previous years. The offenses in this year's Big Ten were much better, in my opinion, than last year's. I don't think that's a controversial opinion at all. So I like the direction in which that is going. I like that in year one, we have something on Ken Palm I can look at and smile about. And I also like that the players bought in, because that is the number one most important thing. It does not matter what I think about on this podcast. Surprising. It sort of does. It matters to you guys, right? It matters to you guys because you listen. You have to say you're listening. But to everyone as fans, as an IU fan, and as people who are hoping for IU to get back to where IU should be, the players have to believe in the coaches. And that showed on the court this year by how much they, in press conference, would talk about defense. How they looked when they played defense, right? They were mad when they committed a foul. Not because, well, sometimes because it was a BS call, but mostly because they felt like they bailed out the offense, right?
Right, exactly.
So I like that. It's nice. It's fun to watch as a fan.
Yeah.
And those are really simple,
Take
ways
pride
to
in that.
describe it, but it's the simple things that are fantastic. And so I'm here for a good defensive IU team for the rest of Mike Woodson's tenure. And I don't think it's crazy of me to expect that. Now, like I said before, we got to wait and see about the offense. But I hope that's what they spend most of the time this summer. Right. Looking at film, dissecting things. What could we have done here with and then what with our personnel next year can we do differently than last year? What can we add? What wrinkles can we do? There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sure a lot of it will involve Jaylen Hood, who's coming in next year. We talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But defense, there's a foundation to build on for this team. There's a rock, literally a rock, sitting on Assembly Hall's court that other teams have to move forcibly to win games. And for that, I'm happy.
Let's see it work. Let's see it keep going here over the next few years. Yeah, I think Indiana will focus on improving offense over the next few months. But again, if you sacrifice defensive excellence, how much does that really matter? So I bet Mike Woodson and the staff will focus on both. Now, you talked about some new personnel coming in. It's time for a social media shout out. And before we pump this out on Indiana HQ, this is why you should be listening and watching to our podcast live. There was a little news broken by 24/7 Sports earlier on this Tuesday, where national recruiting analyst Dushawn London pointed out that Indiana is showing some interest in one of the players in the transfer portal. It's Ball State forward Peyton Sparks. Sparks is a 6'9", 240-pound forward who played 1 year at Ball State. He hails from Winchester, Indiana, Winchester High School. He averaged 13.5 points per game and 8.5 rebounds per game in his first year with the Cardinals. After Ball State went 14-17 this year, their head coach got fired, and Sparks put his name in the portal. And right off the cuff, plenty of high-powered programs are showing serious interest in Sparks. Those four that London pointed out in his article were West Virginia, Iowa State, Loyola Chicago, and Indiana University. So those four schools, according to London's report on 24/7 Sports, are the four teams showing serious interest right now in Peyton Sparks. Matt and I were talking a little bit before the podcast started. It seems like, well, with Race Thompson giving his senior night speech against Rutgers, with Trace Jackson Davis potentially weighing a move to the pros in the offseason, Indiana could certainly use some front court depth, and bringing in Peyton Sparks would do just that. So again, 24/7 Sports analyst Dushawn London, somebody that's worth your time following if you don't already. On our side, again, if you haven't followed us yet, make sure you give us a follow at Indiana HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Again, that's Indiana HQ or the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Matt, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly, Indiana.HQ on Instagram, where we upload content and different photos and images that we see across IU basketball. Make sure you tune in and give us a follow there if you have not already. So, man, the last portion of this podcast, or the last 5-10 minutes we have, let's look ahead, right? And there's so many things to be excited about with this team going forward. We look at the roster. And again, if you head over to indianahq.com/scholarships, we have the entire picture laid out for you. We update it once we hear any kind of personnel news, whether it's current players moving on or new players coming in. Race Thompson and Parker Stewart spoke on senior night. The eligibility questions are a little bit difficult right now because of COVID-19, the way that affected things. But you can expect Thompson and Stewart, as well as Trace Jackson Davis, Xavier Johnson, among others, to make big decisions ahead over the next few weeks, maybe couple months. 3 incoming freshmen, CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, Jaylen Hood, Shafino. We talked about how it's a top 15 class nationally on 24/7 Sports. Man, I know you're really into the recruiting. Talk to me a little bit about these 3 freshmen in summation. What kind of players will Mike Woodson be getting as far as these 3 incoming true freshmen are concerned?
3 shooters. 3 shooters.
Yeah.
I know.
Like
Holy music.
Voice from the heavens, yeah.
By the way, CJ Gunn was an Archie recruit that decided to stay.
Good move.
But
for Archie's standpoint.
Still a shooter. That dude got a jump shot. If anything, there's a lot of problems in this game. I don't think he can dribble at a college level right now. I don't think he can defend at a college level right now. But he can shoot the dang ball.
And Mike Woodson has shown that he can teach defense. So I'd rather have it that way than the flip.
Yes, exactly. Caleb Banks, a diamond in the rough. Okay. He is an extreme athlete. 1. 2, he's got good shot form and he can put the ball in the net. Great. He's going to be a guy I think that's going to be a star at Indiana if he develops correctly. A lot of things going to happen there. He reminds me a lot of Geronimo. I think a little bit faster and quicker. So I think somebody that can defend even more positions than Geronimo can, because Geronimo got cooked, right? Got absolutely cooked by guards this year. He's got to work on his lateral quickness going into next year, because I think he can actually legitimately be an all Big Ten guy. If he takes the leap, I think he can next year. That's a whole other story. Jaylen Hood Shafino, When I mean 5-star, I mean 5-star. He is a 5-star point guard, not Christian Lander. This dude is a baller. Okay, he's gonna do whatever he needs to win. He's more of a combo guard, actually, not just a point guard. He plays a little point, play a little off ball. He can play a lot of defense. He can shoot it from mid range, from 3-pointer. He's got a good layup. He can lay up with both hands. He can dunk the ball too. He's a dude that's going to be playing in the NBA someday. Okay, he just is. He's an NBA kind of player. He's an NBA caliber guard. What's his best position? That's up to the staff to figure out. Is he a big point guard? Is he a ball handling secondary option, a secondary ball handler, and more of a 2 guard? Is he a 3? Where does he fit? Or is he a 3rd guard? Right? Like, where does he fit in the equation? That's up to the staff to figure out. All I know is that he's in the equation next year for playing time. Okay, he's in that backcourt. Xavier Johnson hopefully comes back. You have a 5-star freshman who's gonna get minutes next year. You have a 5-star on the bench. You have a 5th-year Rob Finney, maybe. There's a lot of options at guard next year. I wouldn't be surprised to see IU play a 3-guard lineup. Oh, also you have Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal.
Yeah.
And then you have the aforementioned CJ Gunn.
Right.
There's a lot of guards. Okay.
Yeah.
You have 10 guards. So this team, to me, I'm wondering how the roster is going to be built, who's going to stay, who's going to leave. Because there's only so many minutes, and not all of those guys are going to be as good as the other dudes, and the other dudes that are good are going to play more than the guys that aren't. So is a former 5-star, former top 10 recruit in his class, Christian Lander, going to want to sit next year again as a sophomore?
Tough question, right?
When he could go to a Ball State and be the go-to guy on that team.
Go to Rhode Island.
Go to Rhode Island with Archie too. Does Rob Finney, as a senior, a 5th-year senior, want to have a decrease in minutes coming back next year? Is that something he wants? Is Xavier Johnson going to go pro? Is that going to happen? Anthony Leal, is he going to get minutes at all? Is he okay sitting as a sophomore? Is his mind going, I'm still living at home. I have a scholarship. I'm doing all these marketing deals around Bloomington. I'm living the life. I know I'm going to play my junior and senior year, so I'm going to stick around. Does he have the patience? Trey might get less minutes next year. If he doesn't develop a jump shot, does he put in the work this year to get the fight for that starting spot as a wing and as a guard, the guard/wing?
Right.
What happens to Parker Stewart? Is Parker Stewart coming back? I didn't even mention him in the guards because I don't know. And CJ Gunn, does he redshirt? Does he play? Is he somebody that was undervalued? Like, you could find, as we've shown throughout college basketball history, by the way, there are people that come from high schools in Indiana, like who we just brought up, by the way,
Peyton Sparks,
who come from smaller schools in Indiana and kill it in college basketball. You saw one make the Sweet 16 with Notre Dame this year, and Blake Wesley, somebody who was a recruit that we went
round of 32,
round of 32. Blake Wesley became probably their best player as a freshman, which is unheard of, and is definitely going to be looking at an ACC Player of the Year possible bid next year if he comes back. You know, there's guys from Indiana you can find. So is CJ Gunn one of those dudes? Right? Or who knows?
It's a great question. Yeah, there are some pretty big decisions coming up for a lot of the Hoosiers on this team. It will be fascinating,
including Trace
Jackson Davis. It'll be interesting to see how the roster shakes out. The good news is, though, right, Mike Woodson will have options almost no matter what here as he goes into training camp in the summer. This brings me at least to this final question I had for you, man. And I specifically wanted to ask you, get your mindset on this, right? IU fans reasonably, I don't blame them for this, want to see this team get to a point where they're winning 25 plus games in a season. And they want to see this team making the Elite Eight, Final Four, the national championship game, and win the banner, right? Win that sixth banner. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, regardless of what the team looked like this past season, when you think of Indiana basketball ultimately making one day a Final Four and winning 25 games in a season, 26 games in a season, if not more, what does that roster look like? What position on the court is it strongest in? Is it a younger team or an older team? Is it a team with transfers, a lot of them on it, or not that many transfers on it? You know, as you have that vision for what a successful IU basketball team looks like, ideally in the next 3 to 5 seasons, what does that look like in your eyes?
I'll give you the laydown. The strongest position is everyone. There is not a single there's not a single position that's weak.
It's a Baylor type.
A Baylor type. Look at any top team. Look at Gonzaga. Where's their
Arizona,
weakness?
Kansas.
Look at Arizona. Look at Kansas. Where's their weaknesses, right? At their starting position. At worst, I want one of our guys to be like third team Big Ten. Right, honorable mention. That's at worst.
By the way, that's what Indiana women's basketball has accomplished.
Exactly, and look what they're at. Right,
5,000 point scorers in the starting lineup for the IU women's team. All of them getting Big Ten honorable mention or more.
This is not the same college basketball that John Calipari won with 5 freshmen. Okay, he did that, and what happened when him and Duke and the rest of those programs did that? What happened is that programs that couldn't do that, couldn't go get the 5 stars, swung the entire opposite way. All right. They went and got 5 transfers. They went and got 5 4-year starters, right? And became way more experienced. And that was the way to counter those unbelievable platoon teams, right? That's how you countered it, is you had 5 starters that were better than any of the people that they could bring in. And so for an IU team that's going to possibly hang banner number 6, you need 2 star guards. You need the second guard, the 2 guard, to be able to guard positions 1 through 4 in the defense. The starting point guard needs to be solid and can't be a problem. The wing players need to be able to shoot. That's the 3 and the 4 need to be able to shoot. They need to defend every single position. And the 3 needs to create a jump shot or be able to create offense for himself. The 5 to me in a Mike Woodson defense needs to be a shot blocker. It works. You saw Trace Jackson Davis do it well. He needs to be an elite shot blocker. And then the bench needs to be filled with 3 second-year or third-year guys that know their roles, can come in and do it well, and 1 5-star freshman that is willing to come off the bench and be that star off the bench. A team like that is built for a run in March. You look at teams like Purdue. They have 5 really good starters, a 5-star or fringe 4-star, 5-star freshman off the bench, and then a bunch of really good role players off the bench that know their role and come in and play. Teams like that are built to win in March. That's something that IU needs to look at. It's all about the roster. And you got to have a coach that can not only get the roster to buy in and believe in what he's doing, but also implement a system that can win in college basketball. The defense Indiana plays can win in college basketball. Teams like Virginia have won by defense. Heck, Villanova, by the way, is known for their offense, but really what wins them games is Villanova's ability to defend at a high level and switch. That's something that IU can do. Now they need to get an offense a lot like Villanova's. You win an offense a lot like that Virginia team that won. And so that's the next step, getting players in that can create their own shot off the dribble, create their own shot off of just being super athletic, create their own shot off of just being able to shoot over people. Those kind of things is something that IU needs to find in players in the next coming classes. By the way, I think they have somebody who just won Mr. Ohio basketball.
Gabe Cupps.
Gabe Cupps is somebody that's going to be a foundation for, in my opinion, for a title contending IU team. Somebody like his play style, willing to play either the one or the two, being able to be a distributor, being able to shoot the ball at a high level, being a coach's kid. Somebody like that is something that a college program is built on.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. You know, to me, I think Indiana just needs to get a lot stronger. You know, when I contrast what they have right now to what peak Indiana is going to look like here over the next, like I said, 3, 4, 5 years. Much stronger at the 1, the 2, and the 3. And I think, you know, it's fitting that that's the order when you think about the position, the numbers associated with the positions 1, 2, and 3. I would almost put those in order of importance. Indiana just needs to get a lot better on the perimeter in order to be a real NCAA tournament second or third weekend threat. And so I'm looking forward to seeing Indiana do that. To me, by the way, I don't care so much if it's homegrown players versus transfers. I know that's something a lot of fans in general have that mindset of, you know, we prefer to have our own recruits come into the program and thrive in our system. But really, every top program right now has major transfer influence in their starting 5 or coming off their bench. That's something that's just part of the game nowadays. So I'm not too keen on that as far as specifically. I also want to see an Indiana basketball team, a successful Indiana basketball team under Mike Woodson, to me, gets up and down the floor, not too deliberate or bogged down of an offense, right? You get up and down the floor, create your own shot, really feast in transition, and you have to be able to hit threes. The thing with the three-point shot at Indiana University is the Assembly Hall crowd disproportionately cheers for threes more than any other school in the country. 3-point shots that swish through the hoop get a huge cheer. I saw yesterday, Nicole Cardano-Hillary had one. Chloe Moore McNeil had a couple in the first half. Those almost got louder cheers in the first half than Grace Berger's game-winning layup at the end. And so, at Indiana, hitting those threes out of the corner, straight away, off the dribble, whatever it takes, that's the kind of thing that could really help this program elevate to the next level. I want to see high-flying basketball. I want to see dunks. I want to see threes. And I think, Matt, if we combine what you said to what my vision is, we can really have an Indiana basketball juggernaut here over the next few years. Can't wait to see what Mike Woodson puts together. Matt, as we wind down here on this Tuesday night, any closing thoughts? And I wanted to ask you, with the Sweet 16 coming up this weekend, who do you think makes it to the Final Four, given the 16 teams that are in the field? I'm sure you had St. Peter's in still at this point.
No, I did not. Let's see. March Madness.
So if you ask me, Matt,
yes.
So the four teams that I think get to the Final Four after this weekend are Texas Tech. I think they trip up Duke. I'm not sold that Gonzaga makes it through the end of the night on Sunday. I think out of the East, you're going to have UCLA get to the Final Four. I think out of the South, you'll have Arizona get there, even though they had a nervy finish against TCU on Sunday night. And then out of the Midwest, I've got Kansas making the Final Four. So a couple of 1 seeds, but also a couple of weird ones in Texas Tech and UCLA. How about you? What do you think as far as the teams making the Final Four?
I think that Gonzaga will make it out. Actually, I think they're still my favorites to win the national title. So I have Gonzaga making it out of the West. I have Arizona making it out of their section of the bracket. I have Providence making it out. And I have another 4 seed in UCLA making out. I don't think Purdue beats UCLA. I think UCLA has the weapons to beat a Purdue team, also to match them. I like Providence a lot to beat Kansas. I think their lucky streak continues into the Final Four.
Al Durham, right?
Arizona,
Al Durham, our good friend.
Arizona Villanova will be the game of the tournament, in my opinion. Those teams are that game is going to go down to a single point in the last possession. Gonzaga, Duke, ending Coach K's run in the Elite Eight. Mark Few taking over the mantle as the next Coach K, rightfully so. And that's a great game. And then who knows who wins from there? But my best guess is that it's Gonzaga.
There you go. We'll give our official Final Four thoughts on next week's episode. But for now,
by the way, petition to get Gonzaga in the Pac-12 for basketball.
Yeah, please.
Yes,
it's about time.
Yeah.
Also, Arizona TCU was the game of the tournament. If Arizona Villanova beats that, we're gonna have.
I think Arizona Villanova beats that. You haven't had a buzzer beater. You haven't had a buzzer beater.
St. Peter's tops Purdue in that fashion, then we're all gonna be.
Nithin, it's not March Madness without buzzer beaters. I need my buzzer beaters, okay?
St. Peter's is going to hit the buzzer beater to beat Purdue. There you go.
I'm here for that. By the way, my parents were like, Matt, how is St. Peter's going to beat Purdue? I'm like, I can't tell you. I literally have no idea how they're going to defend Zach Edey. I don't know how we defended him, and we have a 7-footer on my team. The tallest player on St. Peter's is like 6'7".
They stopped Oscar Tshiebwe, Matt, or at least they slowed him down enough to where they beat Kentucky. So
yes, that's true.
Probably use a very similar.
And that's what I was saying is that they're going to have to make life really hard for him to get points. But if he gets in, don't foul. Yeah. So we'll see.
Can't wait. But with that said, that about wraps it up for our 247th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Let's go, ladies. Hoosiers. Let's make the Final Four.